Let's talk a little bit more about the man who negotiated this historic deal, even if nothing happens other than the hostages are released. He was able to orchestrate so many countries to come together, including countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, all of which put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. If nothing else happens other than that, that is a big, big deal. And you're finding the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton praising this deal, the former Secretary of State Leon Panetta under Obama praising this deal, because they realize that this was something that was quite historic, even if the detractors on the left don't do so. Robert Kennedy was fond of quoting George Bernard Shaw, that some people see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. I think that describes President Donald John Trump. So many people have underestimated him. People thought of him as a clown, vulgar, person who insults people, petulant, a diva, in need of adulation. All these things. And look what this man has done in his 2 terms. He's figured out how to use Title 42 during COVID to prevent an influx of illegal aliens. He's changed the whole debate on DEI and race-based preferences. He signed an executive order to dramatically reduce the size of the Department of Education, a department that's done absolutely nothing if the goal was to make sure that our children are getting a solid education. When we compare our results against our competitors in Japan and against our competitors in Western Europe, it is pathetic. He set up DOGE to trim government. I don't know how many Republicans have said we need to get rid of NPR and PBS. He is succeeding in doing so. And even tariffs. He's changed the way people understand what's happened with tariffs. After the collapse of most industrialized countries following World War II, we were okay with rebuilding countries putting tariffs on our goods because we wanted them to rebuild their own industries. Well, they have. As President Trump said in 2018 when he was talking to our NATO allies, Germany is a rich country, yet many of these countries still had tariffs against our goods while we didn't have them against theirs. Donald Trump has changed that. He's also changed the debate about China. We're now real dependent upon China for the things that go into our pharmaceuticals, for things that go into our defense industry, for things that go into our cell phones. And China is our number one geopolitical foe. And we've allowed this over the last 20 years. And Donald Trump is doing something about that. And as I said, what he's done about the borders, for 4 years we were told that the borders are as secure as they could be, said our then DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. We can't do anything, he said, unless we have comprehensive immigration reform. Well, we haven't had comprehensive immigration reform under Trump 2.0. It took him about 1 month. We've not had virtually any illegal crossings in the last 2 or 3 months. It is absolutely astounding. And then we have this historic deal. And I'll tell you why people on the left are not praising him to the extent that they should. He pulls out of the Iran deal, and people on the left went ballistic. The New York Times, in an editorial, went ballistic. He's pulled out of the climate change accord. People on the left have gone ballistic. And what's happened? Economy sound. Inflation has gone from a 40-year high down to around 3%. Stock market hitting record highs. Consumer confidence up. And the catastrophic predictions about the tariffs have not come to fruition. Now, a lot of countries that had them against us are admitting they shouldn't have had them. The NATO countries are now admitting that they have been riding on the coattails of America for a very long period of time, some of whom have even praised President Trump for now increasing the percentage that NATO countries are contributing to NATO from 2% to 5%. Barack Obama complained about NATO not ponying up. George W. Bush complained about NATO not ponying up. President Trump did something about it. However you slice it, that is absolutely extraordinary. And as I said yesterday, regarding quote-unquote race relations, President Trump, by securing the borders, will disproportionately benefit black people because illegal aliens have very little education. They live in low poverty areas, they live in high poverty areas, cheaper areas, where they compete against people living in those areas for jobs, and their presence puts downward pressure on their wages. President Trump has done something about that. He's doing something about crime. Crime in D.C., crime in urban America disproportionately affects black and brown people. President Trump is doing something about that. And President Trump is in favor of school choice. We've talked a lot about the dismal results of urban education. I interviewed a few days ago a man who wrote a book about the Baltimore schools called Failure Factory. 13 public high schools in Baltimore, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. But I'll tell you what I think President Obama has done to improve race relations more than anything else I just now mentioned. And that is, he has removed the fear of being called a racist, the fear of being called a sellout, for speaking the truth about race relations, for telling the truth about crime, for telling the truth about the epidemic of fatherlessness, for telling the truth about how poor the schools are and that we need to do something about it. At one time, when you talked about things like the epidemic of fatherlessness, there was a great fear of being attacked if you're white, and being called racist, and being attacked if you're black, and being called a sellout or an Uncle Tom. President Trump has called the likes of Maxine Waters and Jasmine Crockett low IQ people. And of course, he's being called a racist for saying things like that. Trump doesn't care. And he's given backbone to other people to tell the truth. The media believes that black people cannot be told the truth. As a result, underreporting about urban crime, underreporting about what happens in places like New Orleans and Chicago and Newark and Memphis over the weekend. But Donald Trump has shown a light on what's going on in urban America by dispatching National Guard to various places and improving the quality of life for the very black and brown people that people on the left, the Democrats, purport to care about. This man has been heroic, and he's just 9 months into his second term. What do you think will happen between now and 2028? It's going to be extraordinary. And I think a lot of people are beginning to rethink their attitude towards President Trump. A billionaire in California has now rethought his attitude towards President Trump. That billionaire who gave money to Harvard after he heard how Harvard was not protecting Jewish students has rethought his attitude about President Trump. Bill Maher is praising Trump. Other people are praising Trump.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.